Welcome to Bounce Around Charleston. And today I have with me Reverend Danny Reed from the Unitarian Church, Reverend Nelson Rivers, Charity Baptist Church, and I'll let you tell them about your other position, and Attorney Arthur McFarland. Thank you all for being on Bounce Around Charleston.
Thank you.
We're here today to talk about a serious situation that happened in Ferguson, Missouri. And we want to talk about if a situation like that happened in Charleston, how would we respond? Reverend Reed?
Well, it seems that the strength we need to build on is building relationships now before we have that kind of upheaval. And I'm here to represent the Charleston Area Justice Ministry, and that's one of the proactive things we're trying to do now so that, God forbid, such a crisis ever occur, and it could certainly happen anywhere in America. But we're trying to get to know one another and be proactive about our community's problems and build solutions across congregations, across racial lines, across faith lines, so that we know each other now. So that we're not building relationships in the moment of crisis. We're already united. We're already brothers and sisters from the ground up, from the grassroots, from the pew forward, if you will, so that we'll already be more unified to respond should such a thing happen here.
Okay, Reverend Nelson.
Well, of course it can happen because Ferguson is not a freak. I mean, those aren't people who dropped out of space. If the same thing were to happen, I think the same kind of reaction is very possible. But as Reverend Reed said, and we're part of the same organization, in addition to what I do with Charity and also with the National Action Network with Reverend Sharpton, is that building relationships now are important, but they must be real relationships. And I think Cajun has done extraordinary work on making sure that the relationships are not just with the leaders, but also among the congregations. But I think we do a disservice to ourselves and to the folk in Ferguson to paint them as a bunch of hoodlums who went wild. If somebody is shot in the street, in their neighborhood, say Reed Street, America Street, down on in the neighborhood up in Wayland, and you lay there for 4 hours. They don't cover the body. Nobody can touch the body. The people who knew him just a minute ago as Michael, now he's a corpse. And the person who did it is walking around. And the word spreads. And the reality is this, with Cornell and other cases, they know and I know that the chances of that officer paying for that crime, doing a day in jail, or even being arrested, apparently, is between slim and none. So they reacted. How we avoid that is the presence of justice. What you had in Ferguson was the absence of justice. When you have justice present, then you reduce tension because we have ways to work it out without that happening. And so we ought not assume that it won't happen in Charleston if the same things happen. Our job is to make sure justice is present.
Okay. Attorney McFarland.
And I agree with the statements of Reverend Nelson, because what happened in Ferguson was the result of some long-standing tension. And so the death of Brown just was the occasion for the eruption of what had been building for quite some time. And I think one of the things that all of us have to be mindful of is that on a daily basis, African Americans find themselves in positions where they feel oppressed without alternatives. And Michael Brown's situation just gave the opportunity to express in the most, perhaps not the best way for some viewers, but the way that those who had felt the lack of justice thought that they should respond. And so it is possible that this could happen here in Charleston.
Well, with all of the unrest that we saw in the media, what brought that about?
Well, a lot of things. You know, Reverend Sharpton was called by the family. One of the things we have to, I'm a vice president, national vice president, Reverend Al Sharpton with National Action Network, over his religious affairs, our religious affairs. And I was with him just a few days before that, and he got the call. He does a weekly radio program. And he got a call, and he gets so many of them, he wasn't going to deal with it, but the grandfather was insistent. And he called because Eric Garner just happened in Staten Island, New York, choked to death with a chokehold that's illegal. We just had the case they're still thinking about Trayvon Martin. We just had the young brother Jordan down in Jacksonville, Florida. And so what media has done, social media inside of our community, has made the linkage between this is all connected. So whether it is or not, it feels connected because the scenarios are the same. Unarmed black man shot to death by the police, nobody arrested, nobody pays for it, life is gone. And that is a part of what made it a powder keg. The difference is, if you feel that I can go to the police to get resolved, if I have recourse through the court, I don't have to act up. But America is well known, and unfortunately our history has been sanitized. We don't know what the Tea Party was about, what the Boston Tea Party was about. That was about, I didn't feel any recourse, so I showed out. That's what we're dealing with. So if you don't want that to happen, justice. Because after all, who wants to tear up their own community and burn down their own neighborhood? Nobody in their right mind would want to do that.
Okay, that's what I'm talking about. So then, Reverend Reed, with Justice Ministry, what would you all do to step into a situation like this?
Well, we would speak in a unified voice. We wouldn't be representing only one faith or one community. That's one of our strengths. We're about 30 congregations strong now. We have been in existence about 3 years now, and we're organized well enough now that I think we could respond quickly. But we look like the community, we represent the community, we're not just one faction. And I think that would be a strength. I hope that we've earned the attention of the community, and when we show up in large numbers, we could speak with integrity and with trust. We don't know that yet. We're a new organization and we're learning. But we look like Charleston, we represent Charleston, and I would hope that would make an important difference in such a situation.
Okay, Attorney McFarland, thank you, sir. Are there any guidelines in place that would say when an officer should be arrested for something that he has committed, or does he go on administrative leave until all the evidence has been presented?
Well, in some instances, in most instances, the administrative leave is the initial response of the department. In cases where there's clear evidence that a crime has been committed, there's really no reason to delay the action that is appropriate, and that means, as they're calling for in Ferguson, for the arrest of the officer. One of the things that, just going back to my own experience on the municipal court in Charleston, that I think points to how you can handle this situation is that before Reuben Greenberg became chief of police in Charleston, my experience had been that there had been just a systematic approach to African American males that started with just the basic kind of disrespect. You know, whether it's the N-word or whether it's the rough handling or the whole racial profiling thing. One of the things that Reuben did in order to curb some of the abuse that African American males particularly suffered under his officers was to require that officers file a written report whenever physical force was used. It didn't matter the type of case it was, because it gave him an opportunity and the department an opportunity to address the conduct of officers, perhaps at a level before it reached the use of his weapon.
Okay, something you just said, that Chief Reuben Greenberg put that in place, because in my research I did find out that in many cases the law enforcement have different guidelines in different states and different cities.
That's a leadership question. When what he's talking about, I was a local president of NAACP. I remember meeting with Chief Greenberg so early in this relationship because they shot a guy on Rosemount and they shot him 6 times. And we approached Reuben Greenberg, and Chief Greenberg said, well, Mr. Rivers shouldn't be concerned because there are 3 officers, they had 18 rounds available, they only used 6 of them, so I thought that was a kind of hard answer. So we didn't think we were going to get along, of course. But what he said to me in the very conversation, he said, I promise you this, that'll be the last time a police officer in Charleston will shoot someone without cause, or maybe ever. Do you know that for, I don't know how long Chief served, but until the very last year, we didn't even have a shooting of a civilian by a police officer, which means it's not automatic. You don't have to do it. What he also said was, he used an example, a white officer used profanity on a woman down on Logan Street in that area, and he fired him. That sent a shockwave and a message, because he meant we will not tolerate that. Going forward, we don't have that now so much. We do have officers who profile. We do have officers who are rugged, who talk harshly to folk. We do have folk who instigate. this. And when that happens, Danny Reed, Reverend Reed, and I am part of the same organization. In this way, my church, Charity Baptist, is a member of KJM. His church is a member of KJM. We started at the same time. We're friends. We know each other. We didn't know each other before we started, but if something happens in this community, black, white, or whatever, we expect to not only talk, but to act. Ferguson didn't have that. Maybe they'll have it now. There was no interreligious function among them, but it's now being cried for. One way to avoid it is a stronger Charleston area justice ministry, a stronger police understanding of how you are perceived as the law.
Okay, we're going to stop right here because we're going to take a break. And our next segment, we're going to come back and talk about some solutions that we can present that may help us in this situation. We'll be right back after our station break.
Thank you.